Please leave, it's too cramped in here. That's what Jennifer said with a laugh. It was the most smug and unsettling smile I had ever seen. As I stood there, shocked, Jennifer repeated herself. It didn't make sense to me why I had to leave when it was my house. This is my house, you know. What are you talking about? I know this house is in Daniel's name, she retorted. I was internally appalled at Jennifer's audacity. Even though I had explained it when we got married, it seemed she hadn't been listening at all. Fine, I'll leave. I said this with a sigh, watching as furniture overflowing with Jennifer's tastes was moved in. Jennifer was jumping for joy. It would have been nice if Daniel was here, but unfortunately, he was away on a business trip. He said he wouldn't be back for a month, so the discussion could wait until then. Well then, take care. With that, I left the home filled with memories. My destination was already decided. I'm looking forward to Daniel's reaction when he returns. My name is Karen, a 65-year-old housewife. Thanks to working until I was 60, I receive a decent pension, and the vast inheritance from my husband, who passed away 5 years ago, allows me to live a comfortable life. My husband was born into a wealthy family and was a landlord with several properties. Despite having enough wealth to live without working, he was frugal and loved to work. During the child-rearing years, I would sometimes get frustrated with him for being so absorbed in his work, but I always loved him for his willingness to tackle difficult challenges with a smile. It's been 5 years since my husband passed away in October that year, due to a traffic accident. Coincidentally, it was on our wedding anniversary. I can't get the image of the crushed cake box at the scene out of my head. And he left behind a vast inheritance, compensation, and our precious son, Daniel. Daniel is 40 this year and works for a major company. After my husband's sudden death 5 years ago, Daniel went through a tough time, getting cheated on and divorced by his then-wife. Heartbroken, Daniel briefly sought counseling. I worried he might quit his job, but then he met Jennifer and quickly seemed to recover as they started dating. Since getting married last year, he's been even more motivated at work and appears to have fully bounced back. Jennifer, my son's wife, is a single mother with 2 boys, aged 2 and 5. Daniel, who loves kids, had already become close with them, and I found them incredibly adorable. Daniel had been unable to have children due to an illness in his childhood, so the prospect of having grandchildren filled me with immense joy. I thought Jennifer was quite generous. Although she sometimes made remarks that raised my eyebrows, I believed she was essentially kind-hearted. Daniel felt the same, and that seemed to be the consensus among everyone. So, it never crossed my mind that things could turn out the way they did. After getting married, Daniel and Jennifer moved into a property near our house. I had suggested they live in a house owned by my husband. We want to start in a home we've chosen ourselves. But Daniel insisted. According to Daniel, Jennifer has a fondness for cute things, and none of the available properties matched her tastes. When I first heard this, I was puzzled, but considering they were newlyweds with children, I decided not to dwell on it too much, thinking they deserved to enjoy their preferred lifestyle. Daniel was often busy with work and had to travel frequently. Whenever he was away, Jennifer would come over with the kids for dinner. The grandchildren were very well-mannered and obedient. However, Jennifer was the complete opposite, helping herself to food and routinely rummaging through our closets as if it were normal. She even went as far as to enter our bedroom and take my jewelry. This shocked me, and I felt compelled to address it. Jennifer suddenly burst into tears. I just wanted to get along with you. Please don't hate me. Faced with Jennifer's crying, I ended up comforting her, and the matter was left unresolved. I kept this incident from Daniel, and since Jennifer didn't take anything else after that, I decided to keep it to myself. About 6 months into their marriage, Jennifer began sending the kids over to stay with us frequently. She would call suddenly the day before and hang up quickly, making it difficult to refuse. Reluctantly, I found myself taking care of the kids each time. Though the children remained obedient, their behavior during meals had changed significantly from when we first met. They ate noisily and often dropped food outside their plates. Despite their previously good manners, I had to remind them numerous times. The children would listen reluctantly but revert to their old ways by the next visit. This cycle left me feeling somewhat exasperated. Yet, Jennifer seemed unbothered and would leave her children at our home before disappearing quickly. Initially, Jennifer showed her face, but after a few times, she began sending the kids over by themselves. Jennifer, it's fine for the kids to come over, but I'd really appreciate it if you could come along sometimes. But I'm pretty busy. Jennifer responded evasively to my comment, but that night, I received an unusual call from Daniel. Hey, Mom. Could you try to be a bit more gentle with Jennifer? What do you mean? I was puzzled. I believed I had been more than kind. However, it seemed Daniel didn't perceive it that way. Jennifer feels pressured to show her face often because she's afraid of being put to work like in her previous marriage. She had a rough time with her ex-husband's family. So, please don't push her too hard. Really? Okay, I understand. It appeared my words had been misconstrued by Jennifer. I replied to Daniel with mixed feelings. And the next day, Jennifer sent the kids over to our house again. By the time they had been married for a year, the kids were spending half the week with us. Meanwhile, Jennifer would only show her face a few times a month for about 10 minutes. I harbored some mistrust towards Jennifer, who was always too busy to talk. But when I asked the children about Jennifer's plans, they would just shake their heads with a guilty look. At first, I asked a few times, but seeing their faces made me feel so guilty that I couldn't bring myself to pry any further. Then, one day, Jennifer showed up unusually with Daniel. We sat down for coffee and had a pleasant chat after a long while. That's when Daniel said, "I've got something to say." He looked serious. The kids seem to have grown quite attached to Mom, and I'm often away on business trips, so I can't spend much time with them. If you are okay with it, I'd like you to move in and help Jennifer out. What do you think? Move in? Well, what about Jennifer? I was so surprised by the sudden suggestion of living together that I nearly dropped my coffee cup. Yet, maintaining my composure, I turned to Jennifer. Karen has always been a great help, and I would really like to ask for her help too. Is that so? Then I'll think about it. Daniel seemed pleased with my response. Being the kind person he is, he must be worried about me too. I thought about it for a couple of days and ultimately decided to accept the offer to move in. After that, we started throwing away unnecessary items and setting up rooms for Daniel's family and the children. The cleanup was finished earlier than expected with the kids' help, but the effort left me with muscle pain every day, a reminder of my age. Despite the struggle, I managed to clear out the 2 rooms. While I was busy cleaning, Jennifer didn't offer any help at all. My unease about living with Jennifer grew as I observed her lack of participation. Then came the moving day. As the movers carried in the boxes, Jennifer pulled me aside to the garden. With a puzzled look, I turned to her, only to be met with a malicious smile. Then, unbelievably, she said something I couldn't fathom. "Please leave, it's too cramped in here," laughed Jennifer. It was the most smug and unsettling smile I had ever seen. As I stood there, shocked, Jennifer repeated herself. Why should I leave when it was my house? I was baffled. This is my house, you know. What are you talking about? I know this house is in Daniel's name, she retorted. Jennifer's claim left me internally exasperated. Despite having explained everything when we got married, she seemed not to have listened at all. All right then. I'll leave. I said this with a sigh, watching as furniture filled with Jennifer's taste was being moved in. Jennifer was jumping for joy. It would have been better if Daniel was here, but unfortunately, he was on a business trip today. He said he wouldn't be back for a month, so the discussion could wait until then. Well then, take care. Saying that, I left the home filled with memories. My destination was already decided. I was looking forward to seeing Daniel's reaction upon his return. I immediately moved my belongings into my new house. The new home was a villa we had visited once with my husband, a place filled with memories, including where he proposed. While it didn't hold as many memories as our previous home, it had a special place in my heart, and we had promised to spend our second life here. I finished unpacking everything and relaxed alone on the sofa. The place was very comfortable, thanks to the caretaker's maintenance. I was a bit sad not to see the children anymore, but I was prepared to cut ties depending on Daniel's response. A month flew by, and around the time Daniel's business trip was over, he called me. I picked up the phone, feeling a bit nervous. "Mom, where are you? There's no room for you here, and we were supposed to be living together. What's going on?"
Hasn't Jennifer told you anything?
When I got back, Mom wasn't here, and Jennifer just cries without giving me any answers.
Well then, come to this address I'm about to give you.
I gave Daniel the address and hung up. The next day, Daniel visited my new home with Jennifer and the children. When I opened the door, I saw Daniel with a slightly sullen expression and Jennifer, who was pale.
This house is... Welcome, Jennifer. Is something the matter? No, nothing.
Jennifer was clearly tense, while the children looked around curiously. Especially the 5-year-old, who seemed utterly fascinated. I led Daniel's family into the living room. Seeing the fully furnished space, Daniel seemed to realize I had no intention of living together. "Hey, Mom. Why did you suddenly decide to end the living arrangement?"
Well, Jennifer should know that better than anyone, shouldn't she?
I said, and Daniel scratched his head with a slightly irritated expression. Before starting to recount what he had heard from Jennifer.
Jennifer said you didn't like her taste in furniture, right? But it was just our room, so couldn't you have just let it be? She said she had to buy more furniture for the living room because you left.
Oh, she added more furniture, did she? I looked in Jennifer's direction, and she twitched. However, her lips were slightly curved upwards. She probably thought that without proof, Daniel wouldn't believe the truth coming from me.
Jennifer, why lie? I haven't lied about anything.
Upon hearing my words, Jennifer burst into tears. Daniel consoled her, seeming to regard me as the troublemaker. But the grandchildren, hanging their heads behind them, didn't look at Jennifer. I let out a big sigh. "Jennifer, stop the fake crying. The children can see through it."
That's terrible. Daniel, I'm really not lying, believe me.
Jennifer said this as she jumped into Daniel's arms, burying her face against him and pleading. Though her face wasn't visible, her voice didn't sound like she was crying at all. I was irritated with Daniel for consoling Jennifer.
Mom, Jennifer might have done something wrong, but I don't think it's right to just leave because you're unhappy. Can't we reconcile? Well, I do owe you an apology for leaving without saying anything. But any reconciliation with Jennifer will have to wait until you hear this.
I said this and tapped my mobile phone. Instantly, a voice played out loud. Hearing it, Jennifer's face went pale.
You recorded it. I happened to press the video button.
Actually, I was trying to record a video of the children running around when Jennifer pulled me aside, so the recording continued unintentionally. The voice coming from my mobile phone sounded malicious, unlike Jennifer's usual voice. Daniel looked utterly confused, alternating his gaze between my mobile phone and Jennifer.
Jennifer is the one who told me to leave. I was just complying. Is this really Jennifer? It can't be.
Daniel pushed away Jennifer, who was clinging to him, and questioned her. But Jennifer remained silent, looking down. Daniel grew increasingly frustrated and raised his voice.
Jennifer, answer me. It's not true. Are you taking Karen's side?
Jennifer managed to squeeze out a voice to blame Daniel, but the voice in the recording clearly called out the children's names, leaving no room for escape. As Daniel tried to get the truth out and Jennifer evaded, the cycle grew tiresome. Finally, an exasperated Jennifer let something slip.
I never wanted to live with someone else in the first place. What? You were the one who wanted to live with Mom.
I was shocked to hear this new information. But soon, Jennifer defiantly provided her reason.
Of course, I couldn't understand why Karen was living in a house in your name while we had to rent. I wanted a house of our own.
It seemed she was concerned about being ridiculed for living in a rental after remarrying. Daniel had rented a high-end condominium in the area, costing about $4,000 a month. Yet, Jennifer seemed to scorn it just because it was a rental, giving me a different kind of headache. Jennifer, now defiant, glared at me.
And now Karen is harassing me? This is the house I've always dreamed of. Why are you living here?
Daniel looked perplexed by Jennifer's words. Unlike Daniel, I clearly explained to Jennifer, who was acting like a cat in a fight.
Why? Because this was originally a property owned by my husband. That's a lie. Because this place is.
Jennifer was probably thinking of the caretaker. I showed Jennifer a photo on my mobile phone. Seeing the person in the photo, Jennifer exclaimed,
Father!
My husband had passed away before Daniel remarried, so Jennifer had never met him. She had never called my husband father. Therefore, the father Jennifer referred to must be the children's paternal grandfather. The photo showed Jennifer's Fael and me shaking hands. It was taken as a memento when we moved in. Jennifer looked at me, her face turning pale.
How do you know him? How? Because he's the caretaker here, obviously.
Hearing this, Jennifer sat down on the spot. Daniel also seemed unable to grasp the situation.
This is a good opportunity.
I decided to continue.
We talked when we moved in. That's when I found out he's your ex-husband's father. And the real reason for your divorce, too. The real reason for the divorce?
Daniel's voice echoed in surprise. Jennifer, who had stopped trying to pretend, became suddenly flustered by my words.
Karen! There must be some misunderstanding. I'm sorry. Let's go home together. Mom, tell me.
Interrupting Jennifer, Daniel looked at me earnestly and asked. It would have been less damaging for Jennifer if this had come to light later. But I had no intention of showing mercy. I told the grandchildren to play in the garden. The children looked at Jennifer but nodded at my words and went outside. I waited until the children were completely outside playing, then turned back to Jennifer.
I heard from Jennifer that it was her husband's infidelity, but in fact, it was Jennifer who had an affair.
Daniel was shocked, and Jennifer shook and looked away.
I can't believe this, Karen. Why would you lie about? Oh, I also have a copy of the notarized document here.
I pulled out the document from a drawer and handed it to Daniel. Daniel's face turned pale as he read through the document.
What's this? Compensation? Custody to be discussed again once the child can choose? Meeting before remarrying? I wasn't informed about any of this.
Right.
The other family said they hadn't heard about the remarriage either.
Jennifer looked down, her face turning white. Daniel sighed and turned to Jennifer. His gaze devoid of the initial kindness.
Hey, when I got divorced because I was cheated on, what did you say? That the cheater is to blame, unforgivable, right?
Yeah.
And then, didn't you say, I would never cheat?
Jennifer had a look of not knowing how to answer. Daniel grew increasingly heated in response to Jennifer's silence.
So, the story about divorcing to escape from your husband's infidelity and extreme control, putting the kids at risk, was also a lie? What's that about? I had to say that, or you wouldn't have dated me, right?
Of course not. Daniel yelled back, overlapping Jennifer's desperate response. In contrast to Daniel, who was breathing heavily from excitement, Jennifer started to sulk defiantly. I sighed.
I heard you've been refusing visits since you started dating Daniel. And, apparently, you've been leaving all the housework and childcare to his family. Now you tried to dump it on me after remarrying. Why do you have to say unnecessary things? Because of you, Daniel is mad at me. Don't make him angrier.
Jennifer yelled at me loudly, to which Daniel cast a cold glance. Jennifer's unguarded outburst revealed a starkly different image from the one she had maintained.
It's over between us. Let's get a divorce. What? No. I don't want a divorce.
Jennifer clung to Daniel, who tried to shake her off impatiently. Yet, Jennifer persisted. Just as Daniel's frustration seemed about to explode, an unexpected person entered.
Mom, you're saying the same things you told Dad. You've got a new boyfriend now, so stop bothering Daniel.
Michael, Jennifer's eldest son, spoke with a maturity beyond his 5 years. I wasn't the only one surprised by his sudden return from the garden.
What? Why are you saying unnecessary things? Michael, what do you mean by a new boyfriend?
Stopping Jennifer's angry retort, Daniel squatted down and asked Michael. Looking a bit perplexed, Michael spoke again.
Whenever Daniel's not here, Mom tells me to go to Grandma's house. Then, Mom's boyfriend comes to pick me up. Michael! Don't tell lies!
Daniel hugged Michael and glared at Jennifer. who was taken aback by his genuine anger.
Anyway, let's discuss the rest later, including the boyfriend and the compensation, with him involved. It's not like that. I love you. It was just a little fling with that guy. That guy, huh?
Jennifer looked regretful at Daniel's remark. Daniel stood up, shielding Michael, and looked coldly at Jennifer. Then, forcibly dragging her, he kicked her out of the house.
Wait, Daniel! Open the door! The next time we talk will be with a lawyer involved. I'll let the kids see their father. I've already contacted my parents. They're coming to pick them up. Wait! What do my parents have to do with this?
Jennifer kept knocking on the door for a while, but soon the noise stopped. Shortly after, I could hear arguing voices, followed by the doorbell ringing. Jennifer's parents were standing there, apologized, and after entrusting the grandchildren to me, took Jennifer back with them. The grandchildren were safely introduced to Jennifer's ex-husband's family afterward. It seems Jennifer had changed her phone number and moved without notice since she started dating Daniel, making it impossible to contact her. Her ex-husband and his parents burst into tears and embraced the children the moment they saw them. Although Daniel had already adopted the children, transferring custody to Jennifer's ex-husband took some time due to the process. Jennifer was strictly reprimanded by her parents and now works live-in at a relative's hotel, ensuring she can't run away again. It's a family-run business, and with high alimony payments to Daniel and her ex-husband, she reportedly has almost no time off except for meals. I can't stand it anymore. I want to quit. She often complains like this, but her relatives are said to be strict with her. Daniel, having gone through his second divorce, has sworn off marriage and thrown himself into his work. Though he still seems to be recovering from the shock, I recently found out he's reconnected with a childhood friend who lived nearby, 10 years younger, and they occasionally go out for meals. This childhood friend even visited me to say hello. It turns out she's been in love with Daniel since they were kids, never having a boyfriend because of her feelings for him. It's heartwarming to know the cute girl who used to say she'd marry Daniel still holds those feelings into adulthood. As a parent, it makes me incredibly happy, and Daniel seems a bit pleased too. As for me, I cherish every day living in the house where I was proposed to. The house, altered by Jennifer's changes, has been completely rebuilt and now rents out as a property. Living alone, I never feel lonely, almost as if my husband is still close by. I'm looking forward to enjoying the second phase of my life, so I have plenty of stories to share with my husband when we're reunited.
Who do you think you owe your living to? My son splashed the beer he was holding over my head, and as I stood there drenched, he spat out those words without a care. Rubbing my beer-stung eyes and shivering from the cold, I looked up at my son. His anger only intensified, showing no sign of concern for me. I've had enough. Clutching my hands tightly, I glared back at my son. My name is Nancy. I'm about to turn 60. I raised our son Michael with my husband Joey, who is 5 years older than me. But Michael left home as soon as he graduated from college. Joey and I were enjoying our life as a couple, but in recent years, Joey started having chest pains and went for medical tests. The local hospital in our countryside said they couldn't handle it, and referred us to a larger hospital nearby. After seeing specialists there, it was decided that Joey needed to be treated at an even larger university hospital in the city. The doctors there said regular visits would be necessary for his treatment, and hospitalization might be needed depending on his condition. I worried because just getting to the university hospital required a 2-hour flight. The costs for the visits alone were significant, and we needed to go every 2 weeks. The financial burden was huge. We considered moving, but city rents and living expenses were high. However, calculating the transportation costs of frequent visits, we concluded that moving would be cheaper in the long run. So we moved to a small apartment close to the university hospital. Life in the new place was tough. Even with our savings, the city rent was high. Joey, who had been working until then, was advised to rest, leaving me as the sole breadwinner. Finding a job was not easy at my age, but I managed to get a cashier's job at a supermarket and started supporting our household. One day, on our way back from a hospital visit, "Mom? Dad?" We heard a voice from behind and turned to see Michael, whom we hadn't seen in over 10 years. We had always lived a modest and peaceful life, but Michael had long been dissatisfied with it. When he got a job in a big city company, he said, "I'm finally getting out of here. I won't end up in this suffocating countryside, cutting ties with these poor folks. I'm never coming back, haha." And with those words of farewell, he left home and we lost contact with him. So it was a surprise to run into him after all these years. As I was at a loss for words, Joey suggested we go for a meal since it was lunchtime and we were all hungry. We went to a nearby family restaurant for the first time in a long while. While eating, we told Michael about our recent life. "Please let me live with you," he said. We were shocked by the sudden request, but then Michael explained. He had had frequent conflicts with his boss at work, and after a recent altercation, he quit his prestigious job on the spur of the moment and was now looking for a new one. He ran into us by chance and asked to stay. Seeing Michael struggling and asking for help, we decided to let him stay, on the condition that he pays half of the rent and utilities. At the end of the month, after taking Joey to his regular checkup, I returned home to find Michael just back from job hunting. "Michael, the rent and utilities are due soon. Can you give me your share for this month?" But he didn't respond. Thinking he didn't hear me, I asked again, only to be told he had no money, and wanted to skip this month's payment. Since we were also struggling financially, I insisted on the agreement. "That's so annoying." And Michael, annoyed, threw $50 at me and muttered under his breath. I couldn't help but be surprised at the act of throwing money at someone when they didn't have enough money, but Michael persisted in a voice that was barely audible. "Annoying," and "poor people," frightened but determined. I asked him about the shortfall, to which he shouted, "Greedy, I'll pay the rest later," and stormed out of the house. As expected, that month Michael only paid the $50 he had initially thrown. This was far from our initial agreement, and we were already not living comfortably, so our financial situation became quite strained. But in the following months, the same pattern continued. Michael would refuse to pay, claiming he had no money, and occasionally threw a few dollars at us whimsically. Despite not paying rent or utilities, he ate more than anyone, stayed up late using electricity, and took longer showers than anyone else. Living with him more than doubled our living expenses. We reached our limit and tried to kick him out for not keeping his promise. But whenever we tried, he would kick furniture, mimic punching, and just become uncontrollable. Michael was big, and neither Joey nor I could restrain him. Once he got angry and violent. He would stay in a bad mood for a while, easily set off again by the smallest things. When we locked him out while he was gone, he would bang on the door, yell loudly, and even call the police, claiming his family locked him out, leaving me apologizing profusely to the officers who arrived. Living with this unpredictable ticking time bomb was hard, but he's our son, and we decided to try and set him straight. With the increased expenses due to Michael, I had to increase my part-time work hours. 3 months later, Joey's health improved significantly. We gradually reduced his hospital visits from 2 to 3 times a week to once every 6 months. On the way back from the clinic, Joey and I held hands, happy to have overcome this phase. We couldn't afford a fancy dinner at an upscale restaurant, so we decided to celebrate modestly at home. But to avoid Michael eating it, we planned a slightly extravagant lunch instead. We stopped at the supermarket and splurged a little on some expensive meat, thinking it's a celebration after all. Michael had gone out for a job interview and wouldn't be back until evening. While Joey took a bath, I carefully cooked the steak. Just as the delicious aroma of the well-cooked steaks filled the air, the entrance door suddenly opened. Michael had returned unexpectedly. Before I could say anything, Michael said, "Nice meat," and took both plates of steak. "I'm sorry, that's not yours," I shouted, but he ignored me. He easily brushed me aside when I tried to stop him and took the steak to the kitchen. Opening a beer, he started drinking, and eating the steak we had prepared for our celebration without a word of thanks. "Enough is enough. You haven't paid this month's food expenses, let alone the back rent and utilities. That's for Dad's celebration. I can't forgive this, even if you're my son." I finally lost my patience and shouted. Michael sighed deeply, holding the newly opened beer bottle, and began walking towards me with big strides. Expecting a punch, I raised my arms and closed my eyes, only to feel my head getting wet. Instead of hitting me, Michael had poured the beer over my head. "Who do you think is taking care of you? I'm the one looking after Dad during the day so you can work, right? I'm the one helping him shower. I'm working plenty, and yet you say it's not enough? You mean if I don't pay, I'm not contributing?" He yelled, arguing how much he had been helping us. As I opened my mouth to argue back, he smashed the empty beer bottle on the floor. The sound startling me, and he continued to yell without pause. "Money, money, money. All you think about is money, even though I'm taking care of you. I can't handle a greedy woman like that anymore, so just leave. You're unhappy because I'm not bringing in enough money, right? Then just go." Hearing the sound of a bottle breaking, Joey rushes in, but upon assessing the situation, he stares directly at Michael with a stern look. I let out a deep sigh and fixed my gaze on Michael. Even though he's my son, I can't take it anymore. "I understand. I'll leave by this weekend." At these words, Joey looked shocked and then hung his head deeply. Michael said, "You're staying another week?" he says in a troubled manner. He sounded annoyed and let out an exaggerated sigh before leaving the room without cleaning up, his footsteps echoing. I began cleaning up the broken beer bottle pieces, the wet clothes, and the floor. Joey joined in to help after a while. I couldn't help but sigh deeply, wondering how my son turned out this way. A week later, we were ready to leave the house. Having packed our belongings, the large items were already shipped, leaving only the small things. After Joey left the house first, I looked at Michael. He scoffed and shooed me away with his hand like I was an insect. "Get out of here, you greedy old woman. You don't appreciate a son who cares for you, treating me like a bastard just because I don't bring in money. You're no mother to me." That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Did you ever actually take care of Dad? Michael's face turned red with anger as soon as he heard my words. Normally, I would avoid provoking him, but knowing today was the last day, I felt the need to vent some frustration. "You're taking care of Dad at home so I can work, right? But all you do is watch TV in the living room while I'm out. You even make Dad prepare your lunch. And what about showers? Don't tell me you're calling it caregiving when you just put Dad in the shower and play mobile games in the changing room." That's right, Michael claims to be caregiving, but in reality, he does nothing. It's baffling how he can say that with such confidence, given his indifference towards Joey. Michael yells in response to my words, but it's all vague. He never specifies what he actually does. "I am taking care of him," or, "Thanks to who?" I won't say exactly what I did. Of course, it's Joey and me who prepare the meals. Clean, shop, and take out the trash. The most Michael does is empty the fridge. You're the one who asked to move in, promising to pay utilities and rent. But you didn't keep your promise, bragging about caregiving without doing anything. I tried to kick you out multiple times, but you always got violent, making it impossible to handle you. But this ends today. You need to decide what to do by the end of next month. After that, you're on your own. I can't take care of you anymore. I said this to Michael, explaining his future options, and closed the entrance door in front of him, who looked ready to lash out. In the end, Michael didn't follow me. That night, I received a high-handed message from him asking if I had forgotten all the care I'd given him, and saying he would forgive me now if I apologized. Ignoring it led to another message the next morning, calling us deadbeat bastards who abandoned their son. That was it. A month later, I got a flood of calls and messages from Michael. I didn't notice them during work, and they numbered in the hundreds. I was stunned, but decided to answer when he called again. "Finally picked up, huh? What's this about not being able to stay in the house anymore?" Michael was frantic, repeating he couldn't stay in the house. "It's obvious, isn't it? We had a 3-month rolling contract for that house. I told you several times before I left that we weren't renewing it, so you can't stay there anymore." It seems Michael had planned to take over the house and enjoy living alone, but the house was always on a 3-month contract. We rented it temporarily for Joey's medical appointments, and since his condition improved and he needed fewer visits, we ended the contract. It would be unavailable at the end of next month, I repeatedly explained that if Michael wanted to continue living there, he needed to make his own contract. I didn't know that, you tricked me. Don't be silly. I explained several times and left the necessary paperwork for contract change. Anyway, if you want to stay, you need to make your own contract. Otherwise, you need to leave soon to avoid bothering the management company. I said this and ended the call while Michael was still ranting. Despite him being my son, it pained me to see things turn out this way. He was smart enough to get into a big company, so why did he behave like a tantrum-throwing child? 3 days later, I received a message that Michael had left the apartment without renewing the lease. Michael, who had not been job hunting as he claimed, had squandered the salary he saved from his previous job and couldn't afford rent, so he had no choice but to leave. Seeing a message that he was returning home, I panicked and called him. What? You sold the house? It's my childhood home. How could you do that without telling me? That house was too big for just the two of us. You hadn't been in touch for over 10 years since you left, so I couldn't inform you about selling it. We built a large house during better economic times, thinking of Michael and eventually grandchildren. But Michael left and never contacted us again. Likely never to return. So I decided to sell it to a family who needed it more. You should have told me when we were living together. Hey, give me the money from the sale. That's the house I would have inherited after you died, so I have a right to that money, right? Michael's absurd demands only added to my headache. Even if you say it's your inheritance, the house originally belonged to Joey, and now it belongs to another family. We have no intention of leaving anything for you anymore, so we haven't given you our new address and don't plan to. We're cutting ties with you. I could hear Michael speechless and then shouting in anger, but I hung up without a care. Rubbing my aching forehead, I let out a deep sigh. Soon after, Michael was arrested. Despite all the explanations, Michael had gone to the location of our former home and confronted the family living there, demanding, "This is my house! Get out right now!" He seemed to have yelled. I had warned the family about Michael, so they were prepared. They had secured their home and called the police as soon as he tried to force his way in. Michael insisted to the arriving officers that it was his house, and when they tried to calm him down, he got angry and struck one of them, breaking into someone's house, smashing windows, and assaulting a police officer. Naturally, Michael was arrested for several crimes. We brought apology gifts to the family and neighbors, apologizing and asking them to keep our new address confidential. We used the money from the house sale and now live in a small rented house in an unknown location to Michael. It's close to the hospital, with a large park and walking paths, perfect for walks. We plan to live peacefully and mind our health from now on.